The morning air in Pine Hollow was still and heavy with the scent of pine and smoke. I remember standing at the edge of what used to be my home, staring at the smoldering ruins, unable to move. The air shimmered above the ashes, and bits of soot floated around me like dark snowflakes. My name is Daniel Morris, and that quiet mountain town had been my refuge. I'd bought the cabin 10 years ago, after retiring early from law enforcement. I wanted peace, just trees, a small lake, and mornings filled with birds instead of sirens. For a long while, I had that peace. Until Karen moved in. She was the head of the HOA, though the association was little more than a handful of houses scattered along the ridge. But Karen treated it like a kingdom, and herself like its ruler. Her rules reached absurdity: mailbox colors, fence heights, the approved type of gravel for driveways. The first time she left a printed warning taped to my door, I laughed. The second time, I started to worry. When I refused to cut down 2 old maple trees, because, according to her, they blocked the view of the sunset for the neighborhood, she showed up on my porch in a spotless pink suit and sunglasses, holding a clipboard like a sword. "You can't just ignore WA regulations, Daniel," she said. "We have standards here." I remember replying quietly, "Karen, I didn't move to the mountains for standards. I came for silence." From that day forward, she made it her mission to make my life miserable. At first, it was small things. Letters, complaints, photos of my supposedly non-compliant cabin exterior sent to the WA mailing list. Then came the fine notices, hundreds of dollars for nonsense like unauthorized decorative woodpile and non-regulation fence design. I ignored them. Then someone began dumping trash near my property line. Someone slashed my tires. Once, I found a dead squirrel nailed to my mailbox with a note that said, "Comply or leave." I reported it to the sheriff, of course. But Pine Hollow's small force didn't have much to go on. And most folks were afraid of Karen's influence. She had friends everywhere, or at least people who feared her enough to keep quiet. For months, I thought things might calm down. But I was wrong. It happened one night in late spring. The air was warm, the forest humming with crickets. I was reading by the fireplace when I smelled smoke, sharp, unnatural. Not wood smoke from my hearth, but the kind that makes your stomach twist. By the time I ran outside, flames were crawling up the back wall of the cabin. The propane tank hissed somewhere behind the shed. I grabbed the hose, but the fire was faster. It leapt from the roof like a living thing, painting the night sky orange. Neighbors saw it from down the road. Some came running, but there was nothing anyone could do. By morning, all that remained was a blackened chimney and a few twisted beams. The fire inspector said it started near the fuel shed. "Possible arson," he said, his voice low. My gut already knew who had done it. The investigation took weeks. But finally, the sheriff's department found surveillance footage from a gas station camera 2 miles away. There she was, Karen, buying a can of gasoline just hours before the fire. When deputies brought her in, she didn't deny it. Instead, she smiled. She left a note on my fence the next day, I told the prosecutor later. All it said was, "Maybe now you'll follow the rules." The trial that followed was strange. I'd been in courtrooms my whole life, but this time, I sat not as an officer, not as a witness, but as a man whose life had been burned away. Karen arrived every day wearing the same smug smile. Her lawyer tried to argue she'd been framed, that she was being targeted by disgruntled property owners. But the evidence was clear. The gasoline residue matched the type she bought. Her phone's GPS placed her near my cabin that night. And a neighbor had seen her car parked off the dirt road around midnight. The jury took less than 3 hours. Guilty, arson in the first degree. Months passed. My insurance covered only a fraction of the loss. The cabin I'd built with my own hands, the workshop filled with carved wood and photographs, gone. I moved into a small apartment in town while the sentencing date approached. I spent a lot of time walking near the lake, trying to let the quiet do its work again. But the peace I once felt in those woods was gone. It felt like the fire had burned something inside me that couldn't be rebuilt. The day of sentencing came gray and cold. I wore my old dark suit, the one I'd worn to my wife's funeral years before. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and lemon cleaner. When they brought Karen in, she looked different, smaller somehow, her hair pulled back tightly, no bright suit this time. She didn't meet my eyes at first. The judge spoke in a steady tone, reading the sentence, 10 years in state prison with no parole for the first 6. Then, something strange happened. As the judge finished, Karen turned toward me. For the first time, she looked like a person, not a storm. Her eyes glistened. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came. She was escorted away before she could try again. I thought I'd feel relief. Maybe even victory. But what I felt was emptiness. Over the next months, I tried to move forward. I bought a small piece of land near the lake, nothing fancy, just a clearing with space enough for a tiny cabin. This time, I didn't build a grand porch or stone fireplace. Just 4 sturdy walls, a roof, and quiet. At night, I'd sit outside with a mug of tea, listening to the wind in the pines. Sometimes, I caught the faint smell of smoke in the air, just campfires from tourists, but my heart always jumped before my mind reminded me I was safe. One evening, a letter arrived. The return address read State Correctional Facility. It was from Karen. Her handwriting was sharp, controlled, just like her voice used to be. The letter began awkwardly, almost like a legal statement. Then, line by line, her words softened. She wrote, "Greater than, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I lost everything too. My husband left. My house was seized. I sit here every day thinking about that night, and the sound of fire. I thought I was fighting for order. I didn't see how much hate I had become. I read that letter 3 times before setting it down. I didn't write back, not then, but weeks later, I sent her a short note. Greater than, I can't forgive you yet. But I hope you find peace before I do." It wasn't much. Still, it felt like something began to settle inside me. Years went by. Seasons changed over Pine Hollow. The new cabin grew around me slowly, each board, each nail a quiet step back toward living. I planted 2 young maple trees by the front porch, the same kind Karen once tried to make me cut down. By the time the 6th year rolled around, the trees had grown tall and green, their branches brushing against the eaves. I still lived alone, but I wasn't lonely. Sometimes, the sheriff stopped by with fishing gear, and we'd talk about nothing at all. Then one day, as I was leaving the general store, I saw her. Karen. She was thinner, her hair gray at the roots, her movements slow. She carried a paper bag of groceries and wore a plain sweater. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she nodded slightly. I nodded back. No words, no accusations, just 2 people standing in the same air, both changed by the fire. She walked away, quietly, disappearing down the street. I stood there a long time, watching her go. That night, I sat on my porch again, listening to the wind. The forest was peaceful, the lake silver in the moonlight. I thought about everything that had happened, the house, the trial, the years between. Somewhere deep down, I realized that forgiveness isn't a moment. It's not something you say once and move on. It's a slow rebuilding, like the forest after a fire. I took a breath, long and steady, and whispered into the quiet, "It's over." For the first time in years, I believed it. The next morning, I walked out to the trees I'd planted. Sunlight spilled through their leaves, warm and golden. I laid my hand against the rough bark and smiled faintly. Maybe some things can't be undone. But they can grow again, different and strong. And that, I realized, was enough.